In the 41st millennium, humanity does not explore the stars. It clings to them. A civilization of 1,000,000 worlds, bound together not by hope or discovery, but by blood, scripture, and the grinding certainty that the alternative is extinction. The Imperium of man is not a civilization in any sense a 26th century UNSC officer would recognize. It is a siege, an eternal, galaxy-spanning siege against horrors that do not tire, do not negotiate, and do not stop. Into this siege, something fell. It came without a warp signature, without a Geller field fluctuation, without any of the telltale metaphysical scarring that heralded demonic incursion or Eldar trickery. One moment, the augur arrays of Ultramar's outer defense network registered nothing but the familiar cold geometry of real space. The next, something tore through the boundary between what was and what should not be. A vessel, battered and broken, trailing atmosphere and frozen debris like a comet wearing a warship's corpse. It was not an Imperial ship. The Mechanicus adepts aboard Watch Station Solon knew every hull configuration in their extensive liturgical databases. They knew the predatory elegance of Eldar craftworld vessels, the brutal iron fungus of Orc rock ships, the sleek geometric menace of Tau orbital platforms. What tumbled through their augur returns matched nothing. It was human in proportion and design philosophy, recognizable in the way a sketch resembles a painting, but alien in every specific detail. Its hull plating was the wrong alloy. Its engine configuration burned on principles the adepts had no STC reference for. And across its prow, in a script that required 3 translation servitors and 40 seconds of blessed computation to render, were words that meant nothing and everything simultaneously. UNSC forward unto dawn. Like they dispatched a kill team first. That was protocol. That was always protocol. He was already outside when they arrived. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 stood on the hull of what remained of the Forward Unto Dawn and looked out at a star system that was not his. The math was wrong. The stellar positions were wrong. The composition of the local star's radiation was wrong in ways his Mjolnir's sensors cataloged with the quiet efficiency of a system designed to process battlefield data at superhuman speeds. He had made emergency slipspace jumps before. He had woken up adrift before. He had been alone before. He cataloged the facts, processed them, filed them under problems to solve rather than reasons to panic. Cortana was gone, not dead. The neural interface registered no catastrophic AI failure, simply absent, as though the dimension they now occupied had no address she could reach. The silence where her voice lived was the one thing he permitted himself to notice before sealing it away behind the discipline that had kept him alive through 30 years of war. The approaching vessels were human in silhouette. Roughly, they were also enormous in ways that recalibrated his threat assessment in real time. He counted 8 of them. Drop pods, he realized, but drop pods the size of Pelican dropships, falling with the controlled aggression of soldiers who had done this 10,000 times and expected to do it 10,000 more. They hit the hull of the Dawn with magnetic certainty, and what came out of them was not human. Not quite. They were too large, too deliberate. The armor they wore was not powered exoskeleton. It was them, fused with biology and faith, and something Chief's sensors struggled to categorize. They moved with the unhurried confidence of apex predators who had never, in their entire existence, encountered something they could not kill. He counted 12 of them forming a perimeter around his position. He had faced worse odds. He kept his MA-5D lowered, but did not holster it. His shields flickered at 100%. His motion tracker was alive with contacts, and somewhere in the back of his mind, where 30 years of Spartan conditioning had built something that might have been instinct in a lesser soldier, a single assessment crystallized. These are friendlies. Probably. The largest of them, a giant even by the standards of the others, his armor a deeper, more saturated blue, trimmed in the gold of authority, stepped forward. The faceplate was sealed. The bolter in his gauntleted fist was the size of a UNSC sniper rifle and designed, Chief understood immediately, to fire explosive rounds. A voice emerged, amplified, certain. The voice of a man who had never once in his life considered the possibility that he might not be obeyed. Unidentified soldier, you stand in the sovereign space of Ultramar, under the light of the 500 worlds and the eternal gaze of the Primarch's legacy. You will identify yourself, your vessel, your mission, and your chapter. You will do so immediately, and you will do so without moving that weapon 1 centimeter. Master Chief looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. John 117, he said. UNSC Spartan-II. My mission was classified, and I don't have a chapter. A pause. Then, from somewhere behind the giant in blue and gold, a second voice, younger, less certain, more dangerous in the way that uncertainty always is. Captain Severus, his armor, it's powered, but it's not Astartes. It's not anything. Captain Arius Severus of the Ultramarines 2nd Company stared at the figure before him. Whatever he had expected to find aboard this impossible vessel, it was not this. A warrior in slate-gray armor, standing completely still in the void of space without a breath mask, watching him with the calm of a man who was performing a threat assessment and had not yet decided what the results meant. No, Severus said quietly. So it isn't. If you crave stories of impossible collisions between legends and the grim-dark future, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who bear witness to the dark millennium, and what happens when something from beyond it arrives with its own code of war. The negotiation, such as it was, lasted 11 minutes. Chief had been in enough first contact situations to know that the first 60 seconds determined everything. Not the words. Words came later. I filtered through translator matrices and political necessity. The first 60 seconds were about posture, weight distribution, where the muzzle pointed, whether your hands moved before your mouth did. 30 years of war had taught him that every sentient species in the galaxy, regardless of biology or culture, understood the same primal calculus. This creature is either a threat or it isn't. He kept the MA-5D lowered. He did not step back. He did not raise his hands. He stood exactly as he had been standing when they arrived, weight balanced, shoulders squared, and let Captain Severus run his assessment. The Ultramarines were doing the same to him. He could see it in the micro adjustments of their stances, the way the bolters hadn't risen to firing position but hadn't dropped either. They were professional, disciplined in a way that reminded him of ODSTs on their best days, except that ODSTs didn't stand 6 inches taller than a Spartan-II in Mjolnir and radiate the quiet certainty of beings who had been engineered to believe they were the finest soldiers in existence. Chief had met beings like that before. The Arbiter had carried that same weight, the absolute conviction of a warrior culture distilled into a single individual. It hadn't made the Arbiter wrong. It had made him useful once they'd stopped trying to kill each other. Sauteras spoke first. Your vessel's whole composition does not match any known material in the Adeptus Mechanicus's sacred databases. Your armor is powered. We can detect the energy signature, but it carries no chapter markings, no aquila, no iconography of any Imperial institution. Your weapon, he paused, examining the MA5D with the critical eye of a man who had cataloged 10,000 instruments of death. Fires ballistic projectiles, chemically propelled. It is, by any technical measure, primitive. It works, Chief said. Most things that are built correctly do. Sauteras tilted his head slightly, a gesture that read as something between respect and suspicion. You breathe in vacuum. The armor handles it. For how long? Long enough. Sauteras was quiet for a moment. Then he did something none of the other Ultramarines had done since their arrival. He mag-locked his bolter to his thigh plate. A deliberate, visible gesture. The squad around him did not follow suit. Authority of the Imperium of Man, and the authority of the Imperium of Man, and the sovereign protection of Ultramar. Whether you arrived here by accident or design is a matter for the Inquisition to determine. What I can tell you is this. You are not a prisoner. You are not a target. And as long as you remain cooperative, you will not become either. He paused. The Inquisition will have questions. So do I, Chief said. That surprised them. He could tell, not from any dramatic reaction, but from the fractional adjustment in Sauteras's posture that indicated recalibration. People who were processed through Imperial authority didn't typically respond to its invocation by announcing their own agenda. Chief looked past Sauteras at the system around them. 500 worlds, the man had said. The star was wrong. The spectral signature was close to Sul, but not Sul. The debris field to the system's edge had the particular scattered quality of a recent naval engagement, and recent in astronomical terms meant anything in the last several decades. There were void stations visible at the edge of his helmet's optical magnification, massive things, cathedral-spired and functional, crawling with traffic. A civilization, a human civilization, vast and ancient, and nothing like the UNSC. Where am I? He asked. Sauteras told him. Not everything, not the depth of it, not the theology or the 10,000 years of history, or the weight of what the Imperium truly was. He gave him the functional answer. Ultramar, 500 worlds governed by the legacy of the Primarch robot Guilliman, currently engaged in the ongoing defense of human space against multiple simultaneous existential threats. Chief processed this, filed it. I cross-referenced it against everything his sensors had gathered since arrival. How many fronts? He asked. Severus's expression, hidden behind ceramite, somehow conveyed something that might have been dark amusement. "All of them," he said. "Always all of them." They brought him down to the surface of Macragge 2 hours later, not in restraints, not under armed escort in any meaningful sense. 12 Ultramarines traveling alongside a single soldier was less an escort and more a statement of institutional confidence. Chief walked through the embarkation deck of the strike cruiser Laurels of Calth and catalogued everything. The scale of it. The Gothic architecture pressed into the bones of a warship, as though function and worship had been rendered inseparable by 10,000 years of necessity. Servitors. Humans, partially. He realized with a cold discomfort he kept entirely off his face. Move through maintenance corridors with the blank efficiency of machines that had forgotten they'd once been men. He'd seen the Covenant do worse things to their subject species. He filed that too. Macragge itself hit differently. He had been to human colony worlds, had defended them, watched them burn, rebuilt them in the aftermath of Covenant glassing. He had a baseline for what human civilization looked like under pressure. Macragge was not that. Macragge was what happened when a civilization had been at war for so long that war had become architecture. The fortress monasteries rose like geographic features. The civilian population moved through streets that were also defensible corridors, past buildings that were also bastions, beneath towers that were also weapon emplacements. Everybody here knew they were in a siege. They had simply decided that the siege was permanent and built their lives accordingly. Chief stood at the landing platform's edge and looked out over Macragge's capital, and for the first time since waking up adrift in the wrong dimension, he let himself feel the full weight of where he was. Far from home. No backup. No Cortana. No UNSC. He turned back to Sauteras. "When does the Inquisition want to meet?" "They're already here," Sauteras said. "They arrived before we did." The Inquisitor's name was Valdris Hecht, and he had the eyes of a man who had ordered the deaths of millions and slept perfectly well afterward. Chief recognized the type, not the scale. The UNSC had never produced anyone quite willing to operate at that particular moral altitude, but the type. The administrator who had looked at a casualty projection and decided the math was acceptable. The strategist who had signed off on a glassing recommendation and filed it under necessary. Hecht was that man distilled into ecclesiastical authority and given a rosette that granted him the legal power to do whatever he deemed necessary in the Emperor's name, to anyone, at any time, without appeal. He was also, Chief noted, considerably less physically imposing than every other person in the room. The interrogation chamber, they called it a testimonial hall, which Chief appreciated as an act of architectural euphemism, was deep in the fortress of Hera's administrative complex. Stone walls that had stood for 10,000 years. Luminator globes that buzzed with electrical uncertainty. A table of dark wood that had probably witnessed confessions that ended in execution. Hecht sat across from Chief with a data slate and 2 scribes, and the absolute certainty of a man who had never once been told no by someone he couldn't subsequently have burned. Chief sat across from him in full Mjolnir and waited. "You claim to be human," Hecht began. "I am human." Your armor's energy signature is unlike any registered Imperial technology. Your weapon's ammunition type is chemically propelled, a classification we associate with primitive feral worlds or certain heretical tech cults who reject the Omnissiah's blessing. Your vessel appeared without warp translation, without Geller field activity, without any metaphysical signature whatsoever. Hecht set down the data slate. In my experience, things that arrive in the Imperium without a warp signature are either deeply blessed or deeply dangerous. You will understand if I have not yet determined which. I understand, Chief said. I have similar questions about this place. Hecht's eyes narrowed slightly. You are being interrogated. We're exchanging information, Chief said. That's how I find out if you're worth working with. The silence that followed had a particular quality. Chief had heard that silence before. In high-comm briefing rooms, when he delivered an assessment that contradicted the brass's preferred narrative. In the moments before a superior officer remembered that Spartans were technically assets rather than subordinates, and therefore existed in an awkward disciplinary gray zone. It was the silence of authority recalibrating. Behind Chief, he heard one of Hecht's attendants, an armored figure, Astartes, but not Ultramarine, a black armored and carrying the particular stillness of someone who killed for the Inquisition specifically, shift his weight fractionally. Chief had already mapped 3 exit routes and calculated his shield's current charge. He did not move. Remarkable, Hecht said finally, and the word carried something that was almost, but not quite, admiration. Captain Severus said you were unusual. I assumed he was being diplomatic. He leaned forward. Tell me about your universe. So Chief did. Not everything. He gave Hecht the operational picture. The UNSC, humanity spread across hundreds of colony worlds. The Covenant War, the Flood, Halo. He watched Hecht's expression process the Flood with the particular stillness of a man who recognized a category of threat he'd hoped was unique to his own reality. He watched the scribe's styluses accelerate when he described Forerunner technology. He watched Hecht's eyes when he mentioned that, in his universe, humanity had not yet met anything that required faith as a weapon system. No warp, Hecht said. No psykers, no daemons. Not as you define them. And you defeated this covenant, a multi-species theocratic empire with technology centuries beyond your own. We had help, Chief said, and we adapted. Hecht was quiet for a long moment. Then, and you arrived here how, precisely? Slipspace drive malfunctioned during an emergency jump. Outside known space ever does. He picked outside known space ever does. He picked up his data slate again, made several notations, and then looked at Chief with the expression of a man making a decision he might later regret, but had already committed to. You are, technically speaking, an unregistered human operating in Imperial space with unknown technology and no documentation of any kind. The canonical response to this situation involves several months of detention, extensive psychic screening, and a 53-page application to the Administratum for Provisional Citizenship Status. That's not going to work for me, Chief said. No, Hecht agreed. I didn't think it would, which is why I am instead going to make you Captain Severus's problem with the formal notation that you are operating under inquisitorial observation and that any heretical behavior, xenos affiliation, or warp taint manifestation will result in immediate reclassification. He stood. Can you live with that? I've lived with worse arrangements. Yes, Hecht said, looking at him with those executioner's eyes. I suspect you have. Captain Severus met him outside the testimonial hall with the expression of a man who had been briefed, was not entirely pleased about his new situation, but was professionally committed to managing it effectively. He handed Chief a data slate, a thick brick of technology that functioned, Chief discovered, through a combination of electronics and what appeared to be minor psychic impression. He added this to his mental catalog of things about this universe that violated his physics education. Codex Astartes, Severus said. I've had a version prepared in your language. The translation servitors worked through the night. It is the foundational military doctrine of the Space Marines. If you are going to operate alongside the second company, you will understand how we fight. Chief took it, turned it over. It was heavier than it looked, which seemed philosophically appropriate. You read it, Severus said. It was not a question. Tell me what you think. Chief looked at him. You want my honest assessment. I want to know if the mind behind that faceplate is worth the political difficulty you've already caused me. Severus folded his arms, an interesting gesture on a being whose arms were the diameter of Chief's torso. Hecht will watch you. His retinue will file reports. If you are simply a very well-armed primitive who got lost, this will resolve itself. If you are something more than that, I would rather know now. Chief considered him for a moment. I'll read it tonight, he said, but I already know what I'll think. Oh? Your doctrine is built for a specific kind of war, Chief said. Overwhelming force, superior biology, strategic flexibility within rigid tactical parameters. It's good doctrine, he paused. The question is whether it's the right doctrine for every situation you're being asked to fight. Severus stared at him for a long moment. Read the Codex, he said, then we'll talk. Chief read the Codex Astartes in 4 hours. He read it the way he'd read every piece of strategic doctrine that had ever been handed to him. Not for the rules, but for the philosophy underneath the rules. Rules were situational. Philosophy was the load-bearing structure. You could bend rules when the situation demanded it, but you had to understand the philosophy first, or the bending became breaking, and breaking became the kind of tactical collapse that got people killed. Guilliman's philosophy was, at its core, familiar, disciplined force projection, defined roles within a hierarchical structure, flexibility within established parameters, logistics as the true determinant of victory. Chief had read similar thinking in ONI's archived analyses of 20th and 21st century military theorists. Clausewitz, Sun Tzu, the operational frameworks that had underpinned human warfare long before the UNSC existed. Guilliman had reinvented those wheels with 10,000 years of hindsight and the benefit of a superhuman mind. And the result was something genuinely impressive. It was also, Chief noted, written for Space Marines specifically, for beings with transhuman physiology, enhanced cognition, centuries of combat experience, and the psychological architecture of warriors who had been remade at the cellular level to be incapable of the kind of fear that compromised human decision-making. It was not written for the men and women of the Astra Militarum, who would die in the millions to hold the ground the Space Marines designated as worth holding. He filed that observation. He'd come back to it. Severus found him on the fortress's eastern rampart at 0400 local time, standing in the darkness, looking out over Macragge's capital. The city never fully slept. There were always lights, always movement, always the distant sound of industry that in this civilization was indistinguishable from military preparation. A forge was a weapon, a cathedral was a fortress, a population was a resource. "You finished it," Severus said. Not a question. He'd clearly been monitoring Chief's movements. 3 hours ago, Chief didn't turn. "I've been thinking since." Severus came to stand beside him. At full height, the Ultramarine captain overtopped Chief by nearly 4 inches, which was a novel experience. Now, most beings Chief had stood next to were shorter. "And it's good doctrine," Chief said. "Genuinely good. Whoever wrote it understood war at a level most strategists never reach." He paused. "He also wrote it assuming a stable resource base, a reliable chain of command, and the ability to choose which engagements to accept. How often does your chapter operate under those conditions?" Severus was quiet for a moment, less often than the Codex would prefer. "That's what I thought." Chief finally turned to look at him. "You adapt it. We interpret it. Same thing." Chief looked back at the city. "In my experience, the best doctrine is the doctrine your people actually follow under pressure, not the doctrine written for ideal conditions." Severus made a sound that might, in a being less disciplined, have been a laugh. Guilliman himself said something similar when he returned. At Chief's questioning look, and he added, "The Primarch, he walked among us again, not long past, a miracle that cost more than miracles should." His voice carried something heavy, not grief exactly, but the weight of a truth that didn't simplify easily. He looked at the Imperium he had built and found it changed, calcified. He said the Codex had become scripture when it was meant to be a living document. "Smart man," Chief said. "He is the finest mind in 10,000 years of human history," Severus said, with a conviction that was neither boastful nor uncertain, simply factual. "And even he struggles to change what has been sacred for so long." They stood in silence for a moment. Below them, a column of Astra Militarum soldiers marched through the pre-dawn streets in parade formation. Hundreds of them, las guns at their shoulders, boots striking stone in unison. Young, Chief thought. Younger than they should be. "Tell me about the Chaos Incursion," Chief said. Severus's posture shifted, subtle, but readable. "What do you know about Chaos?" Hecht's briefing covered the basics: warp entities, demonic possession, corruption through ideology as much as direct infection. He watched the soldiers below. "I've fought enemies that used faith as a weapon before. The Covenant built an entire war machine around religious conviction. You learn to understand the belief system if you want to effectively counter it." "Chaos is not the Covenant," Severus said. "No," Chief agreed. "It's worse. The Covenant wanted to fire a weapon they didn't understand because their theology demanded it. Chaos is the weapon. He paused. That makes it harder. People can be convinced their theology is wrong. A force of nature can't be argued with. Severus studied him with an expression that Chief was learning to read. The particular quality of attention an Ultramarine gave something that had exceeded their preliminary assessment. "You've been here 4 days," he said. "I read fast. It is not merely the reading." Severus turned fully toward him, arms folded, the gold of his rank markings catching the pre-dawn light. "I have fought alongside many warriors, guard commanders, inquisitors, even members of other chapters whose doctrine diverges significantly from our own. In 4 days you have demonstrated a quality I did not expect." "What's that?" "You think the way I think," Severus said. "Not identically. Your framework is different. Your universe shaped you differently than mine shaped me. But the underlying architecture, the way you process threat, doctrine, moral complexity," he paused. "You are not simply a well-armed primitive who got lost." "No," Chief said, "I'm not." "The chaos incursion," Severus said, and his voice shifted into operational register. The voice of a captain briefing his forces, precise and without embellishment. 3 systems spinward of Macragge, a chaos warband, world eaters primarily, with a splinter element of Thousand Suns providing sorceress support. They've taken 2 agri-worlds and are moving on a 3rd, 40,000 civilian population, Imperial Guard garrison, 2 regiments, the Cadian 1001st and the Mordian 45th, currently holding a defensive perimeter but losing ground. Chief looked at him. "When do we leave?" Something shifted in Severus's expression. The careful assessment resolved into something more direct. "Dawn," he said. "Tell me, your weapon, the MA5D, what is its effective range against a target in power armor?" Chief thought of the armor-piercing rounds he had remaining. Finite, precious. He thought of the explosive bolts he'd seen the Ultramarines fire and what they did to unarmored targets. "Depends on the power armor," he said, "and the range, and whether I have time to aim." "The World Eaters do not give time to aim," Severus said. "They are berserkers, Khorne's chosen, and they do not stop when wounded, they do not stop when dying. Several have been documented continuing to fight after wounds that would kill a Space Marine." Chief absorbed this, cross-referenced it against his experience with Flood combat forms. Enemies that did not respond to pain, that continued to function past the point where biological logic said they should have stopped. The tactical principle was the same, even if the mechanism differed. "Then you don't aim for the kill shot first," he said. "You aim for mobility, drop them, then finish them." Severus stared at him for a long moment. "Yes," he said, "exactly that." Below them, the Militarum column disappeared around a corner. The city hummed with its permanent, exhausted industry. Somewhere in the distance, a bell that was also a weapon servitor's activation chime rang 6 times. Dawn was coming. The agri-world of Sauteras IV smelled like blood and grain. Chief registered both through Mjolnir's atmospheric sensors as the Thunderhawk broke through the cloud layer. The rich, dark scent of cultivated soil that had been feeding Ultramar for 6 centuries. And underneath it, cutting through it, the copper iron signature of mass casualties. The combination was wrong in the way that only war could make things wrong. The smell of life and the smell of its ending layered together until they became something that had no name in any language Chief knew. He stood at the Thunderhawk's deployment ramp beside Severus and looked down at Sauteras IV's primary continent as it resolved through the cloud cover. Checkerboard agricultural plots stretched to every horizon, or had once. Now a third of them burned. Not the clean burn of a controlled field clearing, but the chaotic, spreading fire of a civilization being eaten from the inside. The smoke columns rose in the particular pattern Chief associated with multiple simultaneous engagement points. Not a front line, a dispersal pattern. The enemy wasn't pushing, they were flooding. "World eaters," Severus said, with a disgust so controlled it barely registered as emotion. "They don't take ground, they take lives. The ground is incidental." "How many?" Chief asked. Estimates put the warband at 800 Chaos Space Marines. Cornate berserkers, the core of them. The Thousand Suns element is smaller, perhaps 60 sorcerers and their rubric marines. The sorcerers are command and control. The berserkers are the instrument. He paused. The guard regiments number approximately 22,000 effectives after 4 days of engagement. They are holding the capital's outer defensive line, but the line is contracting. Chief ran the math. And 800 enhanced berserkers who didn't stop for wounds against 22,000 soldiers whose primary weapon was a laser that required sustained fire to penetrate power armor. The Chaos Space Marines weren't winning because they were tactically superior. They were winning because the math was wrong, and the Guard commanders knew it and were spending lives trying to compensate. He'd seen that pattern before, had lived inside it, had pulled people out of it more times than he could count. The Thunderhawk descended toward a landing zone that had been a grain processing facility 48 hours ago and was now a forward command post. Chief could see the Guard fortifications from the air. Sandbag emplacements, vehicle berms, last cannon positions set to cover the primary approach corridors. Competent work. The kind of defensive geometry that someone had learned through experience rather than read in a manual. He revised his assessment of the garrison commanders upward. They hit the ground, and the noise hit Chief like a physical force. The World Eaters were not subtle. He had read about them in the briefing materials Severus had provided during the transit. The 8th Legion, Khorne's chosen, warriors who had fallen to the blood god's blessing, if blessing was the word, during the Horus Heresy 10,000 years ago, and had been killing ever since with the particular, focused enthusiasm of beings for whom war was not a means, but an end. They didn't strategize in any meaningful sense. They arrived. They killed. They moved to the next thing to kill. What they lacked in strategy, they compensated for in raw, horrifying capability. Chief watched through Mjolnir's optics as a World Eater in rust-red armor, chain axe in each fist, hit a Guard fortification 200 meters to the north. The fortification had been designed to stop light vehicle fire. The berserker hit it at a full run and kept going, through the sandbags, through the last cannon emplacement, through the 4 soldiers operating it. The screaming lasted approximately 2 seconds. Chief had his MA-5D up and was moving before the screaming stopped. Severus's voice came through the Vox, the communication system Chief had been integrated into through a rapidly improvised interface that the Ultramarines tech marines had constructed with the pained expression of men being asked to violate something sacred. Chief, our objective is the command node. The sorcerers are coordinating the assault from the central hab complex. Eliminate the psychic coordination and the berserkers lose cohesion. Understood, Chief said, but that fortification just went down. The guard will reinforce. In time, Chief was already running. The distance between his position and the collapsed fortification was 180 meters of open ground that was, technically speaking, a kill zone. Chief covered it in 11 seconds, shields flaring twice as las fire from confused guard soldiers tracked across him before someone with authority and situational awareness called a ceasefire on the gray-armored unknown. He didn't slow down for either hit. The World Eater was still there, had not, in fact, moved to the next thing to kill, was instead standing in the wreckage of the fortification, doing something that Chief's threat assessment registered as celebrating, and which was disturbing in a way that bypassed analysis and went directly to instinct. The berserker's armor was covered in scripture that had been carved into the ceramite, not painted, carved deep by something that had left channels for blood to run through. The helmet was a skull motif distorted by 10,000 years of mutation until it was no longer a motif, but a fact. It turned when Chief was 30 meters out. The chain axes came up. Blood for the blood god! Chief put 2 armor-piercing rounds into its left knee at 25 meters and 1 into its right ankle at 20 meters, and stepped aside as 250 kilograms of Chaos Space Marine hit the ground with the momentum of a falling building. He was on it before it stopped moving, Mjolnir's full weight driving a knee into its weapon arm. And then he did what Severus had described. Not the kill shot, not yet, but immobilization first. The World Eater was still screaming liturgy at the blood-soaked sky when Chief put the 4th round through its helmet. The silence afterward lasted approximately 1 second. Then 12 guard soldiers who had been sheltering in the rubble of their fortification were staring at him through the smoke, and Chief looked back at them, and the moment had the particular quality of a situation that needed to be resolved quickly before someone made a decision based on fear. "Get back to your positions," he said. His Vox translated it into Gothic through the improvised interface. "There are more coming." One of them, a sergeant, Chief read from the rank insignia, young enough that the war hadn't fully finished carving itself into her face, said something that the translator rendered as, "What are you?" "Friendly," Chief said. "Move." She moved. They all moved. Discipline holding even through shock, which told him something important about the Cadians, specifically that he filed for later. He was back on Severus's Vox frequency a moment later. "Fortification secured. 4 guard casualties before I arrived. What's the approach route to the command node?" A pause. Then Severus's voice, carrying something that was not quite surprise, but was adjacent to it. "Through the central market district. Approximately 400 meters of urban terrain. Heavy contact reported. I'll need the Thousand Suns psychic signature on my display, Chief said. Can your librarian provide that? Another pause. Longer this time. Brother Librarian Kathos will mark them, Severus said. Chief, Captain, the World Eaters travel in packs. What you just engaged was a scout element. The primary warband numbers will be in the market district. Chief checked his ammunition count, and he had been careful with it since arrival. Had not fired a single round in Macragge. Had inventoried everything he had remaining from the Forward Unto Dawn's armory. He had enough for this engagement. Probably. He had the combat knife. He had Mjolnir's fists, which on a Spartan-II in powered armor were weapons in any calculus. He thought about the Cadian sergeant's face. The guard soldiers rebuilding their fortification behind him right now. Working fast, working scared, working because that was all there was to do. I'm aware, he said. Mark the targets. He moved into the smoke. The market district of Sauteras IV's capital had been, before the World Eaters arrived, the kind of place that accumulated centuries of character in its stones. Chief could see it in the architecture. Buildings that had been repaired so many times their walls were a geological record of disasters survived. A market stalls whose awning brackets had been replaced by hands that had replaced them before. Cobblestones worn smooth by 600 years of foot traffic. A place where people had lived, specifically and individually, in all the particular ways that made a location a home rather than a coordinate. The World Eaters had been through it for approximately 3 hours. Chief moved through what remained in a tactical crouch. Mjolnir's motion tracker alive with contacts and cataloged the destruction with the part of his mind that processed battlefield data and the other part, the part that 30 years of war had never quite managed to fully militarize, registering what the data actually meant. The market stalls were not destroyed. They were unmade with the particular thoroughness of beings for whom destruction was a spiritual practice. The cobblestones were cracked not by explosions, but by impact, by things that had run across them fast and heavy and without any concern for the infrastructure beneath their feet. And the civilians. Chief had seen a great deal of death, had caused a significant portion of it. He did not look away from it, and he did not flinch from it, because looking away was a luxury that got people killed, and flinching was a delay that cost seconds he never had to spare. He looked at everything, cataloged everything, and kept moving. But he noted it. He always noted it. The Chaos Sorcerer's psychic signature bloomed on his display as Brother Librarian Kathos marked them. 3 concentrations triangulated around what had been the market's central forum. The Thousand Suns were not like the World Eaters. Where the Berserkers moved like a natural disaster, the Sorcerers moved like a surgical instrument. A chief could see their work in the way the guards' defensive attempts had failed in this sector. Not overrun by brute force, but unraveled. Last fire mysteriously losing cohesion. Vox communications fracturing into static and screaming. Soldiers becoming confused, and then afraid, and then something worse than afraid. He'd fought the flood's coordinated forms. He understood what it meant to face an enemy that attacked the mind as readily as the body. He was on the 2nd concentration's position when he found the survivors. They were sheltering in a fortified basement beneath what had been a medici station. 17 civilians and 8 guard soldiers, the soldiers having pushed the civilians into the structure's most defensible interior space, and then constructed a barricade from medici equipment and their own bodies. A sergeant, older than the Cadian he'd met at the fortification, old enough that the war had finished its work on him completely, was directing his people with the quiet efficiency of someone who had accepted that he was probably going to die here and had decided to make it cost as much as possible. Chief found them because the sergeant was still transmitting on a guard frequency, a clipped professional distress call that had been broadcasting for 2 hours into a VoxNet that was too fractured to receive it. He dropped through the medici station's blown-out roof, landed in the rubble of the ground floor, and came down the staircase to find 8 lasgun muzzles pointed at his faceplate. "Friendly," he said. His Gothic translation was getting faster. "Drop the line of fire. You're pointing at each other's positions." The sergeant, his name tag read Vaskin D, stared at him for exactly 3 seconds. Then, "You're the gray one. They said there was a gray one at the northern fortification." "Yes." "You killed a world eater." "Yes." Vaskin looked at his soldiers, looked back at Chief. "Can you get us out?" Chief checked his motion tracker. The second sorcerer concentration was 110 meters northwest. Between his current position and the extraction route to the guard lines were approximately 40 contacts, a mix of World Eater scouts and what his sensors identified as rubric Marines. At the Thousand Suns automata, ceramic shells containing nothing but dust and sorcery. He'd been briefed on them. They did not tire. They did not feel. They were, in the most literal possible sense, empty armor that killed because it had been instructed to. "I can get you out," he said, "but I need your soldiers to do exactly what I tell them, when I tell them." Vaskin nodded. No hesitation, no committee. Chief revised his assessment of the man upward. "Northwest exit," Chief said. "We move in 30 seconds. Your people stay behind me and don't stop moving regardless of what happens. If someone goes down, you keep moving. I'll recover them if it's possible, but you don't stop." One of the civilians, a woman, middle-aged, with the particular stillness of someone who had been afraid for so long that the fear had metabolized into something functional, said in careful Gothic, "What about the others? There are more shelters. We've been hearing them on the civilian band." Chief looked at her. "How many?" "At least 3 more positions, maybe 200 people total." She held up a small communicator, civilian grade, short range. "We've been talking to each other, trying to stay calm." He checked his motion tracker again. Severus's frequency was still active. The main Ultramarine push toward the central forum was engaged. It's still active, still broadcasting its still active, still broadcasting its psychic disruption across the sector. The math was simple. Eliminate the command node. The assault lost coordination. Get these civilians out. He saved 25 people. Those were not the same objective on the same timeline. "Vaskin," Chief said. "Can your people get to the civilian band frequency?" "Already on it," the sergeant said. He'd produced a Vox unit from somewhere, and was adjusting it with the speed of someone who'd been doing exactly this kind of improvised communication for decades. "Patch me in," Chief said. Vaskin handed it over. Chief held the unit to Mjolnir's external speaker array. "This is..." He paused. In his universe, he had a designation, a rank, a unit. And here he had none of those things in any form that would transmit authority to frighten civilians in a basement. He chose the simplest possible identifier. "This is a soldier. I'm coming to get you out. I need each group to identify their position and how many civilians are mobile and how many need to be carried. You have 60 seconds." The civilian band erupted with voices. He sorted through them in 40 seconds. 4 shelters. Combined 189 civilians, with 31 who needed to be carried or supported. 8 guard soldiers spread across the 4 positions. Extraction route would require passing through 2 World Eater patrol corridors and the edge of the second Sorcerer concentration's area of effect. He keyed Sauteras' frequency. "Captain, I need a flanking element. 2 squads, Market District Southeast Quadrant. I have 4 civilian shelter positions and approximately 190 souls to extract." Sauteras' response was immediate, but carried a weight that Chief had learned to recognize as the sound of a commander doing math he didn't like. "Chief, our primary objective is the command node. Civilian extraction is..." "Something I'm doing," Chief said. "I need 2 squads to cut the patrol corridor at grid reference Delta 7. Can you spare them?" A pause. In the background of Sauteras' feed, so Chief could hear the sound of the Ultramarines' assault on the Forum, bolter fire, the crack of psychic energy discharge, the ground-shaking impact of Astartes in close combat. Severus was in the middle of a fight. "Grid Delta 7, Sauteras said. "You'll have them in 4 minutes." "Copy that." Chief handed the Vox unit back to Vaskin. "Change of plan. We're not just getting your people out." Vaskin looked at him steadily. "All of them?" "All of them," Chief said. The sergeant was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at his soldiers and said something in a regional Gothic dialect that Chief's translator rendered approximately as, "Told you the gray one was worth waiting for." They went out the northwest exit 30 seconds later. The extraction took 41 minutes. Chief did not count the minutes while they were happening. Time during an operation existed as a resource to be managed, not a measurement to be observed. But afterward, in the particular stillness that followed sustained combat, the number assembled itself from the component parts. 11 minutes to reach the first secondary shelter, 6 minutes of contact with a World Eater patrol that had 3 berserkers and ended with 3 dead berserkers and Chief's shields at 60%. 8 minutes navigating the edge of the Sorcerer concentration, during which 2 of Vaskin's soldiers experienced what the sergeant described as the fear that has no reason, and Chief guided them through it by the simple method of staying visible and keeping his voice level and moving forward. 16 minutes of combined movement once all 4 groups were consolidated. 189 civilians and 19 guard soldiers moving through the wreckage of the market district toward the guard lines, while Chief and Sauteras' 2 flanking squads held the corridors open. 183 of them made it. Chief noted the 6, filed them where he filed everything that mattered. Moved on because that was what you did. You noted the cost and you kept moving, and you didn't let the weight stop your legs, because stopping your legs didn't bring anyone back, and it got the people still moving killed. The Inquisitor was waiting at the guard command post when they arrived. Hecht had not, Chief suspected, been at the command post for the duration of the engagement. He had the look of a man who had just arrived specifically to be present for this moment, which told Chief something about how Hecht operated that he added to his existing file on the man. He stood beside the command post's primary Vox array with his scribes and his black-armored retinue, and he watched Chief walk in with 183 civilians and 19 soldiers, and said nothing for a long moment. Then, the primary objective was the command node. "The command node is down," Chief said. "Severus's assault neutralized the sorcerer element 40 minutes ago. The World Eaters lost coordination and are being driven back by the guard counterattack." He checked his motion tracker out of habit. "The engagement is effectively over. The command node was neutralized despite your diversion of Ultramarine assets to a secondary objective," Hecht said. "Not because of it." "Yes," Chief agreed. "You split Severus's force during an active assault on a hardened psychic position. 2 squads. The assault had sufficient strength without them. And if it hadn't," Chief looked at him, "then I would have made a different call." He paused. "But it did." Hecht studied him with those executioner's eyes, and Chief met the look without adjustment. The way he'd met every superior's assessment since he was 6 years old, and the UNSC had taken him from Eridanus too, and begun the process of making him into what he was. 183 civilians, Hecht said. 189 extracted, 6 lost in transit. The guard garrison had written off this sector, Hecht said. The civilians in those shelters were not on any extraction manifest. They were, he paused, choosing his word with visible care, accepted losses. "I didn't accept them," Chief said. The silence that followed had a different quality than the silence in the testimonial hall. That silence had been the sound of authority recalibrating. This silence was the sound of something more complicated. A worldview encountering a fact it didn't have a category for. Sergeant Vaskin, standing 3 meters away with his soldiers and looking like a man who had been awake for 4 days and intended to stay awake for 4 more, said something quietly that Chief's translator caught. "In 40 years of service, I have never seen a Space Marine come back for the written off ones." "I'm not a Space Marine," Chief said. Vaskin looked at him with the expression of a man for whom that distinction had just become entirely theoretical. Severus found him an hour later, cleaning and inventorying his ammunition with the methodical focus of a soldier who treated his equipment as a direct extension of his combat effectiveness. The Ultramarine captain sat across from him on a supply crate that compressed significantly under his weight and watched the process in silence for a moment. "The Inquisitor is filing a report," Severus said. "I expected that. It will note that you diverted Ultramarine assets without authorization during an active engagement. It was 2 squads. I asked. You agreed. Chief checked the MA-5D's firing mechanism. 314 rounds remaining across all weapons. Finite. If he has a problem with the decision, that's a conversation for you and him. He doesn't have a problem with the outcome, Severus said carefully. He has a problem with the precedent. An unregistered soldier operating in Imperial space, making independent tactical decisions that affect Astartes' disposition. Captain, Chief set the MA-5D down and looked at him directly. 183 people are alive who were on a written-off list. If the Inquisitor's problem is with the paperwork implications of how that happened, I understand his concern. It doesn't change what I'd do the same situation again. Severus was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. That is precisely what concerns him. Chief picked up the MA-5D again. What concerns you? The question landed differently than Severus expected. Chief could tell from the fractional shift in his posture, the brief delay before response. The Ultramarine captain was not accustomed to being asked what he thought, as distinct from what the Codex said or what the Inquisition required. Honestly, Severus said, yes. Nothing about today concerns me, Severus said. Today was correct. The civilians are alive. The objective was achieved. The cost was acceptable. He paused. What concerns me is tomorrow and the day after, and what Hecht's report precipitates. Chief looked at him. Explain. You have been in Ultramar for 11 days, Severus said. In that time, you have demonstrated tactical competence that exceeds most guard commanders I have worked with. You have shown an ability to adapt to an entirely alien combat environment with a speed that should not be possible. You have made decisions that contradicted Imperial protocol and produced superior outcomes. He folded his hands, massive, ceramite-covered hands that had killed for 50 years. The Imperium does not respond well to individuals who contradict protocol and produce superior outcomes. Why not? Because the Imperium is held together by doctrine, Severus said, not by outcomes. If outcomes were the measure, the Imperium would have remade itself 1,000 times. Instead, it maintains its form through absolute consistency of practice. A soldier who contradicts protocol and fails is a heretic. A soldier who contradicts protocol and succeeds is a far more dangerous problem, because success is an argument, and the Imperium has very few tools for dealing with arguments it cannot simply execute. Chief processed this. It was, he thought, the most honest thing anyone in this universe had said to him. So the Inquisitor is going to try to contain me, he said. He is going to try to define you, Severus said. Contain is a secondary objective. First, he needs a category. Blessed figure, Xenos-tainted threat, rogue asset, independent operative. The category determines the response. He looked at Chief steadily. I would suggest you give him a category before he invents one. And if I don't fit any of his categories? Severus stood. His full height in the low-ceilinged command post required a slight forward tilt that somehow made him look more imposing rather than less. Then we will have a significantly more complicated problem, he said. One I am not certain even the Codex Astartes has a solution for. He moved toward the exit, stopped. You asked what concerns me, he said, without turning. I will tell you the full answer. A pause. What concerns me is that you are the finest soldier I have met in 50 years of war, and I am not certain this Imperium deserves what you are willing to give it." He left. Chief sat with that for a long moment. Then he picked up his ammunition count and went back to work. The Inquisitor's report took 6 days to generate consequences. Chief spent those 6 days doing what he always did when there was no active engagement to manage. He learned. He walked the Fortress of Hera's training halls and watched Ultramarines drill with the focused attention of a student who had no interest in performing ignorance. He sat in on tactical briefings until the officers stopped looking uncomfortable about his presence, and started occasionally directing questions at the gray-armored figure in the corner who had, on 3 separate occasions, identified tactical solutions that the briefing room had missed. He visited the Astra Militarum encampment outside the fortress walls and talked to guard soldiers. Cadians, mostly, practical and unsentimental, and possessed of the particular gallows competence of people who had survived by being better at their jobs than the situation had any right to expect. He learned Gothic faster than the translation servitors could keep up with. Not perfectly. There were idioms, theological references, the specific weight that certain words carried in a civilization built on 10,000 years of sacred war, but functionally. Enough to communicate without the interface. Enough to understand what people said when they forgot he was listening. He learned, among other things, what the Imperium actually did with worlds that couldn't be held. He'd had suspicions, had been carefully not asking about it, the way you didn't ask about things you weren't ready to process until you were sure you needed to. But 6 days of observation filled in the picture with the patient thoroughness of evidence accumulating whether you wanted it to or not. He heard the word exterminatus twice in briefings, each time delivered with the flat affect of a procedural notation, the way you'd note an ammunition resupply or a change in patrol schedule. He cross-referenced it against the Codex materials and the supplementary briefings Severus had provided, and what he found sat in his chest like a stone, a procedure, an option on a menu. The complete destruction of a planetary population, billions of human lives, as a tactical calculation. He'd seen the Covenant glass worlds, had watched Reach burn from orbit with the kind of grief that never fully metabolized into anything useful. He knew what it meant to lose a planet. He understood, in the abstract, the brutal arithmetic of sacrificing a world to prevent a larger catastrophe. The difference that mattered, that he kept turning over in the 6 days before Hecht's consequences arrived, was that the Covenant had glassed human worlds because they wanted humanity gone. The Imperium burned its own worlds because it had decided, in its 10,000-year calculus, that some populations were less valuable than the tactical problem they represented. And he didn't have a solution to that. He wasn't sure there was one, but he noted it, filed it somewhere that wasn't the same place he filed tactical data. Hecht's consequences arrived in the form of 3 black ships. Chief watched them descend through Macragge's atmosphere from the fortress rampart and identified them by their silhouette from the recognition files Severus had included in his briefing package. Black ships. The vessels of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, which in practice meant the vessels of the Inquisition. When the Inquisition needed to move something it didn't want, moved in any ship that kept records. They landed at the fortress's secondary embarkation deck, not the primary, which would have been visible to the militarum encampment, but the secondary, which suggested someone valued discretion. Severus appeared beside him without announcement. He'd been doing that, materializing at Chief's shoulder when things were about to become complicated, with the punctuality of a man who monitored situations carefully and positioned himself accordingly. 3 ships, Chief said. Yes. That's not a conversation. That's a removal. The Inquisitor has determined your category, Severus said. His voice carried something Chief had not heard in it before. A careful neutrality that was doing significant work. You are classified as a grade Vermilion anomalous asset. It means, in practical terms, that you are too valuable to execute and too unpredictable to leave operational. So they're taking me somewhere. A black ship's standard operational profile includes a processing facility in the segmentum solar. You would be studied, evaluated, eventually, possibly assigned to an inquisitorial retinue where your capabilities could be directed by someone with the authority to direct them. He paused. You would not be harmed. You would not be imprisoned in any conventional sense. You would simply be managed, Chief said. Yes. Chief looked at the black ships, looked at the fortress around him. 10,000 years of stone and faith, built by beings who had decided that the only response to an unwinnable war was to build walls so thick the war couldn't reach the things worth protecting. He understood that impulse, had lived inside it. He also knew what happened to soldiers who got managed by people who valued control over competence. He'd watched it happen to ONI assets, had been, technically, an ONI asset himself once, before the Covenant War had made the question of who owned the Spartans irrelevant in the face of who needed them. "What do you want to do?" Severus asked. The question surprised him, not because it was unexpected from Severus. He'd learned that the Ultramarine captain had a consistent habit of asking it, of treating agency as a relevant variable, even when institutional pressure suggested otherwise. What surprised him was how clearly, in the moment of being asked, the answer assembled itself. "I want to keep doing what I've been doing," Chief said. "Fighting where it matters, making calls that produce the best outcome for the most people." He looked at Severus. "Is that something the Second Company can accommodate?" Severus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had shifted into something Chief hadn't heard from him before. Not the operational register, not the strategic assessment mode, but something that felt, for a being of Severus's nature, dangerously close to personal conviction. "The Codex Astartes," he said, "does not have a provision for this situation. There is no precedent, no established protocol, in no chapter in Guilliman's doctrine that addresses the integration of an extra-dimensional human soldier operating outside Imperial hierarchy." He paused. "What the Codex does have is this: a principle Guilliman considered foundational enough to place in the first chapter, before doctrine, before tactics, before everything else." Another pause. "A commander's first obligation is to the outcome. Everything else, hierarchy, protocol, precedent, exists to serve the outcome. When it fails to serve the outcome, the commander must decide what the outcome requires. Chief looked at him. You're going to intercede with Hecht. I'm going to have a conversation with the Inquisitor, Severus said carefully, in which I will note that a grade vermilion anomalous asset who is cooperative, productive, and integrated into an existing operational structure represents a significantly more useful resource than a grade vermilion anomalous asset in a processing facility in the Segmentum Solar. And if he doesn't agree, Severus turned to face him fully. The gold of his rank markings caught the pale Macragge sunlight, and Chief was struck, not for the first time, by the sheer physical presence of the man. Not just the size, but the weight of 50 years of war carried in the set of his shoulders. The absolute stillness of someone who had long ago made peace with the possibility of his own death, and was therefore free to think clearly about everything else. Then we will have a problem, Severus said, and I will handle it. You'd put yourself in conflict with the Inquisition for this. I would put myself in conflict with the Inquisition, Severus said, for the correct outcome. He turned back toward the fortress interior. Guilliman would. I have read his words enough times to be certain, and until someone of greater authority than Hecht tells me otherwise, I am going to operate on the assumption that the Primarch's foundational principle outweighs an Inquisitor's classification report. He stopped at the rampart door, did not turn. Hecht is meeting with me in 1 hour, he said. I would suggest you be in the training hall, visibly occupied when that meeting occurs. It will be easier for everyone if the asset in question is demonstrably useful rather than demonstrably concerned about the outcome. Chief nodded. What should I work on? Severus's voice, as he disappeared into the fortress, carried something that might, in a being less composed, have been dry humor. The Codex Astartes, Chapter 12. Combined arms operations in urban terrain. We have another deployment in 6 days, and I intend for you to be on it. The deployment was to a world called Optera Secundus, and it was burning when they arrived. Not the agricultural burning of Sauteras IV, not the chaotic spread of a warband moving through civilian infrastructure with the focused indifference of beings for whom destruction was incidental to the killing. Optera Secundus was burning with purpose. The chaos force here was not world eaters. It was something older, more patient, and considerably more dangerous. A warband of the word-bearers. In the 17th Legion, the first and most theologically committed of the Chaos Space Marines, who had spent 10,000 years not merely fighting the Imperium, but actively trying to replace it. Where the World Eaters brought slaughter, the Word-bearers brought conversion. They were burning Optera Secundus's cities not to destroy them, but to reconsecrate them. Overwriting 10 millennia of Imperial faith with the scripture of the dark gods in fire and blood, and the specific, practiced methodology of beings who had been doing exactly this for longer than most civilizations had existed. The population of Optera Secundus numbered 11 million. The word-bearers had been on the surface for 9 days. Chief read the intelligence briefing on the Thunderhawk and said nothing for a long time. Then, how many have they converted? Sauteras, across from him in the deployment bay, didn't soften it. Estimates suggest between 300,000 and 500,000. Warp has rewritten them at a level that renders them functionally a different category of being. Sauteras held his gaze. They are not prisoners. They are not civilians. They are combatants, and they will fight with the conviction of the truly faithful. Chief filed this in the place where he kept the things about this universe that he could not fix, only navigate. And the remaining 10 million? That is why we are here. The Thunderhawk broke through Optera Secundus's cloud layer, and the scale of the operation became visible. 6 strike cruisers in low orbit, 4 companies of Ultramarines deploying across 17 simultaneous vectors. Astra Militarum regiments, Sauteras had requisitioned 4, had fought Hecht's logistics apparatus for 2 days to get them, establishing perimeter cordons around the largest civilian population centers. It was, Chief recognized, a genuine combined arms operation of the kind the Codex Chapter 12 described. The chapter he'd studied in the training hall while Sauteras negotiated with Hecht, the chapter that addressed exactly this scenario, with a clarity that suggested Guilliman had fought this kind of battle more than once and had thoughts about how to do it correctly. Hecht had, in the end, agreed to Sauteras's terms. The chief didn't know what those terms were exactly. Sauteras had not elaborated, and Chief had not asked. What he knew was that the black ships had departed Macragge 3 days after their arrival, without him, and that Hecht's retinue had reduced from 12 to 4. And that the Inquisitor himself had said exactly 2 words to Chief in the days since. Prove it. Chief intended to. The Word-Bearer's command structure was nothing like the World Eater's. Where Khorne's warriors were a force of nature, directional, overwhelming, tactically simple, even in their ferocity, the Word-Bearers operated with the patient complexity of an institution. They had commanders who thought, chaplains who coordinated, a dark apostle at the center of the operation who was, according to Brother Librarian Kethos's psychic reconnaissance, conducting a ritual in Optera Secundus's primary administratum complex that would, if completed, loud. "He's thinning the barrier," Chief loud. "He's thinning the barrier," Chief said, translating Kethos's careful language into operational terms. "Between real space and the warp, local, permanent." "A warp rift," Sauteras confirmed. "Yes, if he completes the ritual, this world becomes a staging ground for demonic incursion in perpetuity, not a battle. A wound that doesn't close." "How long does he have to complete it?" "Kethos estimates 4 hours from our arrival, possibly less." Chief looked at the tactical display. The administratum complex was in the city's center. Between the Thunderhawk's current approach vector and the complex were approximately 2 kilometers of urban terrain, held by a combination of word-bearers, converted civilians. He refused privately to call them cultists, though he understood why the Imperium did, and a category of entity that the tactical display marked in a red that was darker than the standard threat color. Demons. Actual demons. Warp entities given physical form by the ritual already in progress, anchored to real space by the Dark Apostles working. Chief had read about them. had seen the Inquisition's pick captures, had processed the accounts of survivors with the careful attention he gave to all intelligence, regardless of how far outside his existing framework it fell. Seeing them in person, on Mjolnir's optical feed as the Thunderhawk made its final approach, was different. They were wrong in a way that bypassed analysis. Not wrong like an alien species was wrong. Not the wrongness of a different evolutionary path producing a different solution to the problem of existing. Wrong like a logical contradiction made physical. Like something that should not be able to occupy space was occupying it anyway, and reality was quietly filing a complaint that nothing was processing. He noted his own reaction, acknowledged it, set it aside. "The Dark Apostle is the objective," he said. "Neutralize the ritual, close the nascent rift, extract. Civilian preservation where tactically feasible." "Yes," Severus said. "The problem is the approach. The word-bearers have layered their defense with precision. Every obvious route to the complex is held by hardened positions. They've had 9 days to prepare." He highlighted 3 corridors on the tactical display. "Each of these approaches would cost us significantly before we reach the complex, and we do not have the time to spend." Chief studied the display. 2 kilometers of urban terrain, layered defenses, a ticking clock, converted civilians who would fight alongside power-armored Chaos Space Marines, demonic entities with no fixed tactical behavior pattern, a target at the center who needed to be stopped before he finished a ritual that would permanently damage a world. He'd had worse problems. He thought of Halo. He thought of High Charity. He thought of every time the scenario had been impossible, and the only available response was to find the seam in the impossible and push through it. "You're not going to use any of these 3 corridors," he said. Severus looked at him. Explain." "They're all obvious. The word-bearers have had 9 days, and they're methodical. They'll have every obvious approach covered, and they'll have reserves positioned to respond to whichever one you commit to." He traced a different line on the display. "This drainage infrastructure. It runs under the city center, exits here, 30 meters from the complex's secondary entrance. It won't be held because it's not in any tactical map. It's municipal infrastructure, civilian grade, not in any military survey." "How do you know it exists?" "I asked a sanitation worker in the refugee processing area this morning," Chief said. "She lived in this city for 40 years. She knew the infrastructure the way you know the Codex." Severus stared at him. "You spent your pre-deployment preparation talking to a sanitation worker," he said. "I spent my pre-deployment preparation gathering intelligence," Chief said. "She was the best available source for this specific category of information." He met Severus's gaze. 2-man element through the drainage route. You and me. We reach the complex, neutralize the Dark Apostle, interrupt the ritual. Main force holds the perimeter, keeps the word-bearers from repositioning their reserves inward. A 2-man strike on a hardened command position defended by Chaos Space Marines and demonic entities, Severus said. "You've done worse," Chief said. "And so have I." A long pause. The Thunderhawk's deployment alarm sounded. 60 seconds to landing. "Chapter 12, Severus said finally. "What?" You said the Codex's Chapter 12 addressed combined arms in urban terrain. He stood, full height, filling the deployment bay. Guilliman also wrote a Chapter 17. It is very short, 3 pages. He mag-locked his bolter and picked up a second weapon, a power sword, activated, humming with blue-white energy. It addresses situations where doctrine has run out of answers. Its core principle is simple. "What is it?" Chief asked. Sauteras looked at him with the expression of a man who had served a Primarch and internalized his philosophy completely enough to carry it without the book. "Trust the soldier in front of you," he said. "Everything else is commentary." They went through the drainage system 40 seconds after touchdown. And behind them, the main force of the Ultramarines' second company hit the word-bearer's perimeter like the fist of a god. The drainage system smelled like 6 centuries of civilization and 3 days of war. Chief moved through it in a combat crouch, Mjolnir's sensors sweeping ahead, the tunnel's dimensions tight enough that Sauteras behind him was moving with his pauldron scraping stone on both sides. A sound like a blade being drawn continuously, rhythmic, almost meditative. The noise of the battle above filtered down as vibration more than sound, the particular frequency of bolter fire and demonic shrieking translated by meters of ferrocrete into something that felt like the city's pulse. They moved fast. No communication. They had established the route, the breach point, the objective parameters, and the contingency signals before entering the tunnel, because tunnels were places where Vox traffic echoed and enemies listened. Chief counted distance by stride and cross-referenced against the mental map he'd constructed from the sanitation worker's description, and at 430 meters, he stopped and pressed a fist back. Halt. And Sauteras stopped without question, without sound, with the absolute physical discipline of a being who had been doing this for 50 years. Chief sensors had found something. Not a word bearer, not a demon, something that registered on his motion tracker as human-sized and human-patterned, but with a psychic signature that Kythos had taught him to recognize. The particular warp stain of a converted civilian who had accepted the word-bearer's gift and been remade by it. 3 of them, crouched in a side tunnel junction 12 meters ahead, positioned to cover the main channel. An ambush, which meant the tunnel route was not as unknown as the sanitation worker had believed, which meant someone had done their preparation carefully. He signaled Sauteras. 3 contacts, junction ahead. Sauteras's response was a single hand gesture. Your call. Chief thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. 3 converted civilians, armed, certainly. The word-bearers equipped their converts with whatever was available, which, on a civilized world, meant autoguns, stub weapons, possibly lass weapons from guard armories that had fallen in the first hours of the occupation. Not power armor, not enhanced physiology. Human beings who had been given a terrible faith and pointed at an enemy. He could go through them. Mjolnir's shields would handle anything they were carrying. He could be through the junction and pass them in 4 seconds, with 0 rounds expended and acceptable shield degradation. He thought about what they had been 9 days ago. 11 million people living in a city that had stood for 6 centuries, going about the particular ordinary business of being alive. He thought about what Sauteras had said. The corruption is total. They are not civilians. They are combatants. He thought about Vascan soldiers in the Medici basement, about the Cadian sergeant at the northern fortification, about the woman with the civilian communicator who had known there were other shelters because she had been talking to them, trying to keep them calm. He thought about the 4 hours that were now 3 hours and 40 minutes. He went through the junction in 4 seconds, non-lethally where it was possible, which was 2 of the 3. The third raised a weapon fast enough that the calculus shifted, and Chief made the call that the calculus required, and kept moving, and did not look back, and noted it in the place where he noted everything that mattered. Severus came through behind him without comment. The secondary entrance to the Administratum complex was a maintenance hatch, locked with a mechanism that had been designed to resist civilian intrusion and lasted approximately 2 seconds against Mjolnir's grip. They came up into a service corridor that smelled of ozone and something underneath the ozone that Chief's sensors flagged as warp bleed. The particular atmospheric signature of a location where the boundary was already thinning, where the physics of the 41st millennium were beginning to defer to something older and worse. The Dark Apostle's ritual had been running for 9 days. They could feel it in the walls. His name, according to the Inquisition's intelligence file, was Valdricus the Unceasing, and he had been conducting rituals in the Emperor's name. The other Emperor, the one the word-bearers served, for 6,000 years. He was old enough to remember the Horus Heresy not as history, but as personal experience. He had converted more worlds than some Imperial commanders had defended. He was, by any honest measure, one of the most dangerous individuals currently alive in the 41st millennium. He stood at the center of the Administratum complex's great hall, which had been transformed over 9 days into something that was simultaneously a place and a wound, at the architecture overlaid with scripture in a language that Chief's translator refused to process, simply returned incompatible, do not render, and surrounded by 8 rubric Marines standing at the cardinal points of a ritual circle that had been drawn in materials Chief didn't want to identify. 4 word-bearers stood guard at the hall's main entrance. Chief and Severus came through the service access on the hall's eastern wall. The 4 word-bearers turned. What followed lasted 90 seconds and was, Chief would reflect later, the clearest demonstration of what happened when 2 different traditions of superhuman warfare worked in genuine concert rather than parallel. Severus was power and doctrine, 50 years of Codex refined technique, the perfect expression of what Guilliman had designed the Astartes to be, a bolter and power sword working in the choreographed violence of a warrior who had done this so many times it had become something beyond instinct, something closer to art. Chief was adaptation and precision, 30 years of learning to kill things that should not be killable, Mjolnir's shields absorbing what Severus didn't intercept, the MA-5D's remaining armor-piercing rounds placed with the economy of a soldier who knew exactly how many he had left and spent each one like a decision rather than a reflex. 90 seconds, 4 word-bearers down. Valdracus had not stopped his ritual. He was speaking, had been speaking continuously, a low, resonant liturgy in the language Chief's translator refused, his arms raised, the circle around him pulsing with light that was not light, energy that was not energy, a sensation that pressed against Chief's shields, not physically, but in some other register that Mjolnir had no instrument to measure. The nascent rift above the circle had opened to the diameter of a Thunderhawk's wingspan and was showing something through its aperture that Chief looked at for exactly 1 second before deciding that looking at it further served no tactical purpose. Chief raised the MA5D. Severus's hand came down on the barrel. "Bolter rounds disintegrate in a ritual circle of this magnitude," he said. "The psychic field converts kinetic energy to warp fuel. We would accelerate the process." "Then how?" "Physical contact. We break the circle." Severus looked at it. "The circle's anchor points are the rubric marines. Destroy an anchor point. The circle fractures. The ritual collapses." "The rubric marines are inside the circle." "Yes." Chief looked at him. "Your bolter rounds convert to warp fuel." "What about mine?" Severus paused. "Chemically propelled ballistic rounds, not psychically aligned." He processed this with the speed of a tactician recognizing an asymmetry. "They might not convert. They might simply work," Chief said. He put 3 rounds into the nearest rubric marine. The ceramic shell, empty of anything living, shattered at the 3rd impact. The anchor point dissolved. The circle flickered. Valdracus turned for the first time. 6,000 years of war looked at Chief through a helmet that had been old when the Imperium was young, and what came through the ritual circle's flickering boundary was not fear and not surprise, but something Chief recognized with the clarity of a soldier who had faced the Covenant's high prophets, the Gravemind, every category of enemy that had been absolutely certain of its own inevitability. Contempt. "A human," Valdracus said, in Gothic, with the particular disdain of a being who had converted or killed every human he had ever encountered. "A small, brief, unblessed." Chief put 2 rounds into the 2nd anchor point. The circle fractured down its eastern meridian. The rift above it contracted sharply, the aperture shrinking with the sound of something vast and angry being denied. Valdracus stumbled, not physically, but metaphysically, at his connection to the ritual disrupted in a way that 6,000 years of practice had never prepared him for, because 6,000 years of practice had never included chemically propelled ballistic rounds. Severus was through the fractured circle boundary before the Dark Apostle recovered. The power sword's blue-white energy left a line across the great hall that took 3 seconds to fade. Valdracus, 6,000 years of accumulated horror and faith and war, and hit the floor of his own ritual circle and did not rise. The rift above them contracted to the size of a doorway, then a window, then a crack, then nothing. The silence was enormous. Chief stood in it and let his shield cycle down to passive mode and listened to the building around them settling. The warp pressure that had been building for 9 days releasing through the rift's closure in a long, subsonic exhalation that his sensors registered as atmospheric normalization, and his instincts registered as something enormous letting go of its breath. Through the Vox, the sounds of the battle outside were changing. The word-bearer's coordination without their dark apostle, was fracturing. He could hear it in the shift of fire patterns, the Ultramarine squad leaders calling adjustments as the enemy's cohesion degraded. The militarum regiments on the perimeter were pushing inward. 6,000 years. Yes, Chief said, 6,000 years. Yes, Chief said. He converted 11 worlds before this one. Yes. And a chemical round brought him to this. Chief looked at him. Preparation and precision bring everything to this eventually, he said. Given the right approach vector. Severus looked at him steadily. Something in his expression had settled into a quality Chief had seen developing over 31 days. Not the careful assessment of the first meeting, not the strategic calculation of the middle period, but something that, in a less composed being, might have been called simple respect. We should call in the all clear, Chief said. Yes. Severus reached for his vox, stopped. Chief. Captain. When we return to Macragge, he said, I intend to file a formal request with the chapter master for your integration into the second company's operational structure. Permanent attachment, not inquisitorial oversight, not provisional status. He paused. It will require Hecht's endorsement, which will require Hecht to admit that his classification report was overly conservative. Will he? He already has, Severus said. He filed the amendment yesterday. He is many things, Hecht, but he is not a man who ignores evidence. A pause. He called you a necessary anomaly. I believe, for Hecht, that constitutes high praise. Chief looked around the great hall, at the ritual circle fading as its power source collapsed, at the rubric marine shells scattered and broken, at the rift closure scars in the air where something vast had almost gotten through, at the architecture of a civilization pressing its faith into every stone, in the same civilization that had written off 11 million people as an acceptable loss before recalculating. One condition, Chief said. Severus waited. The written off ones, Chief said. Wherever we deploy, whatever the manifest says. He looked at Severus directly. We don't leave them. Severus held his gaze for a long moment. Then he raised his vox. Second company, all elements. This is Captain Severus. Objective neutralized. Begin consolidation. Civilian extraction is primary. I repeat, primary. A pause. Leave no one on the manifest. He looked at Chief. All clear, he said. Chief looked at the fading rift one last time. Through Mjolnir's sensors, Optera Secundus's atmosphere was normalizing. 11 million people, fewer than that now, but more than there should have been without the last 90 seconds, were still breathing. He noted it, filed it somewhere other than the tactical archive. Then he followed Severus toward the exit, and behind them, the great hall settled into silence, and the city outside began, slowly, the long work of remembering how to be itself. In the end, the Imperium did not know what to do with John 117, so it did what it always did with things it could not categorize. It put him to work. He fought alongside the Ultramarines' second company for what the Imperium's fractured timekeeping registered as 3 years. He never found a way home. He looked periodically, with the methodical persistence of a soldier who doesn't abandon objectives, consulted Mechanicus adepts, Inquisitorial xenotechnologists, a radical inquisitor who specialized in dimensional anomalies and owed Hecht a considerable favor. The slipspace mathematics remained broken in ways that Forerunner technology, absent its creators, could not repair without resources Chief didn't have. He adapted. That was what Spartans did. He learned to fight demons, learned the particular, in terrible grammar of warp-born combat, what worked and what didn't, and why faith was not superstition in this universe, but a genuine force multiplier that he couldn't access but could work around. He learned to read the warp's influence in a battlefield before it fully manifested, a skill the Ultramarines librarians found both useful and deeply unsettling. He learned to speak Gothic without the translator, well enough that guard soldiers occasionally forgot he hadn't grown up speaking it. He never learned to accept the expendable math. The written-off ones remained non-negotiable. It caused friction. It also saved lives at a rate that made the friction, by any honest accounting, worthwhile. Severus called him a necessary anomaly, which Chief suspected he'd borrowed from Hecht. He called Severus the finest commander he'd worked with, since a certain elite had decided that honor mattered more than theology, which he understood was high praise, even if Severus had no context for it. The Imperium of man was not the UNSC. It never would be. It was ancient and brutal and magnificent and deeply structurally wrong in ways that one Spartan could not fix in 3 years or 30. But it was full of people worth fighting for. That had always been enough.